Hi, this is Alexander Hall, going to talk to you about my assessment of my monologue of Philip the Bastard from King John on the 30th of November. So I'm going to talk to you about how my process worked leading up to the assessment and how it worked out at that time. So, what specific methods did I use in rehearsal and how did it help me for the assessment? So, my reference points that I used a lot of, I used the 1984 BBC version film that starred Leonard Rossiter as King John, and then of course there was George Costigan who played the bastard, who was the character I was playing. The thing that I kind of looked at as well was looking at how I was learning through the visual effect that was given, and looking at how much I could just take in all the information and really process it to get the idea of the character, because I learned about the bastard really well, about how George Costigan portrayed him. And it was a good help in how I wanted to give out my monologue in the assessment. And the thing that I learned a lot of is that he's quite a narrative character, because there are some monologues where he's like speaking to the audience, he would speak to the camera. And I think George Costigan, one of the things that made him a good reference for me was that I could tell he was a lot more of a stage actor than a screen actor when he started filming for that particular film version of the play. Is that you could really see that this was kind of like his first real screen experience, because you could see from the way he was projected a lot. I mean, I don't know what it was like in terms of how mics worked back in the 80s, but you could really tell how he was projected around how it worked all over how the acoustics, how the echoes were going around the whole studio where it was being filmed, because it was all set in like a studio, the whole thing, even in areas which were like open air, it was all set in a studio. But I could see really well that he had a lot more of a stage persona to him. And he probably was the reason why I kind of really took to him and took a lot of admiration out of him, because he had that presence of a stage actor, which is kind of the thing I want to go into, and it's one of my main aims to be as a career. But yeah, that's the thing that I kind of looked at when watching that film, and how I learned different things, because I watched it twice fully. So I watched it when I first thought of taking the monologue, and then I used it as like a reference just to get myself into the character. And then once the history, which I'm going to talk to you about now, is that I learned very fully about what the whole plot was. So I looked at the history, so looking at what happened, because this was actually a true story, because Shakespeare took quite a few true stories, and this was one of the examples that he used. It was all about how England took control of quite a lot of France, but there were particular parts of France that took control of themselves. They wanted to be independent, so the likes of Paris was independent of France, but the rest of it was kind of like England's control. And during the point when King John was in charge, from 1199 to 1216, it was during the battles, so they were battling their way on who was going to take less charge and who was going to take control of their own part of the country. And at that point, King John was quite a naive, he was very selfish, but he was also, he got his authority got the better of him, as you could see quite well. And then you could see from Philip the Bastard, he was, the brother of King John, but he felt like he was like the hierarchy, he felt like he was the better man. And he felt really betrayed, and he felt like he had a bit more common sense. You could tell quite well that he kind of, when he was speaking to the screen in the actual film, that he seems like this much more confident and a lot more of someone who would speak truth. speak the real truth from how he spoke from his heart. And that's the thing I liked about him very much so, from how I learned a lot from him and looking at how that sounded to me in the way it did. And it was great. It was a great character kind of to really reference and really think about and really take a lot of time into looking through. And it was a great process to find myself doing, to really look at this, look at how the bastard was reacting to like how France and England were mashing together, trying to fight themselves because they wanted particular authority. They didn't want something from each other. And it turned into a complete havoc. And it ended up with like there being betrayals and so much more. Of course, with the young King Arthur from France being said that he might want to take charge of England, and King John was getting really frightened that he like slaved him, and he tried to escape, but he accidentally killed himself from jumping off the castle, and then King John was then frightened to death because he was only just given like particular authorities by the Pope. The legate Pope. So, and in that sense, he thought, I can stop this. And in the end, because he then got poisoned, it killed him off. But that was where it all kind of showed how much of a bloodshed and how much rivalry there was between countries, and there still is now. But back in that time, during like the centuries and centuries ago, there were enemies between country to country, and it's still we still have a problem with it, but it was a lot more severe back in the olden times than it is now. After the Second World War, we were kind of like a lot more civilized. There's a lot more chivalry, but back in olden times, no, there wasn't. There was a lot more dictatorialness coming across, especially that's what Shakespeare wants to give across. From what I could tell from the likes of with Romeo and Juliet, there's a lot of authority and a lot of control and a lot of rivalry. It's the same with Hamlet, the same with Macbeth, but it's the same with King John. Same thing again. There's a lot of rivalry. So how did this convey with rehearsals? So I had the opportunity to get as much independent study that I did a lot from home, because we were required to do that, and I kind of thought I could take a lot of initiative from doing it at home. And I learnt a lot. And it came in, and I only got the chance to rehearse it and then perform it with my mock assessment, and then I went straight into doing it right from the real assessment. So I only got to show it twice. And at that time, it was more or less you had to really do your own bit of it. And it's one thing that, you've got to try and do when it comes to auditions. If you go to an audition, they would expect you to self-direct yourself, to learn your part and not just learn your lines, but learn your character and put your own trait to it and put your own spin to it. And it's all about independence. And that's the one thing that a lot of actors need to do, because there'll be points when, directors will be relying a lot on you to find your balance of your character and finding the research that you can use to really push your own character to its natural self, so that you can naturally get yourself into that character. So it's a good help for me to see just how much independence I had to use to get myself there. And it worked because, I'm quite an independent guy. I like to use my own initiative to see what I can do with my energy and how my character's energy can be put as me to come across, and see what happens with it. But yeah, it really worked. It was a good way to go. And how did the rehearsal process go? So, despite getting less time to rehearse it at college and given more independent study, the thing that I saw was very small, picky areas of what I could improve for my mock assessment when Leanne gave me my feedback. It was so useful, and it also was really quite good to see how much I worked and how much I learned from it. You know, Shakespeare's not my forte, but I could tell just how much time went into it and how much I did, which I probably don't realise, you know, because I probably thought to myself after I did the Shakespeare monologue and I didn't get into the monologue slam. But actually looking back, I realised actually I did better than I thought. It's probably just because, you know, spaces, and you know, you can get rejected for anything, you know. Even if you do a great job, you still could get rejected. It could be for many different reasons, but not taking it personally. And that's another thing I can probably mention later. But yeah, the thing that I have recognised a lot from doing this is that, you know, with really putting in a lot of time, that there's some really torturous bits of work that you have to do to really get your character into the right frame. Really learning the plot line, learning how to visually combine your character, and, you know, put it in a modern version because, you know, it's the cheapest way to do it. You know, because you want to try and give this kind of modern spin to your Shakespeare character, as that's what a lot of actors do nowadays because it's the cheapest way to do it. Because, you know, those olden clothing is ridiculously expensive and you'd have to be a richer to get it. So, yeah, it's, you know, and I loved it, you know, because I also got the chance to get support from people outside of college. Like, I got one of my parents' friends who's like a massive Shakespeare fan helped me out, and she gave me a lot of really good help on how to get through that character, because history is a very hard subject that I find really difficult, and because Shakespeare made a lot of historical plays that were based particularly on a particular time, I would really struggle to really understand it and really get the idea of what it's trying to express to us as the modern audience. And I knew it was 1199 to 1216, and it was a point where, you know, France and England were had bad forms of each other, and, you know, you wouldn't see it, but they had massive problems with each other. And so I wanted to kind of look at that in real detail and look at that in slick detail as much as anything. And it really worked. Just really getting that time to really put as much effort into it and find that real balance of using the character as a good mixture of seriousness and you know, looking at how Philip the Bastard is reacting to King John's ideas and his agenda that he put across as the king, and thinking he's an absolute idiot. You know, it's a bit like having Donald Trump and you've got someone who's like in the Liberal Party who's probably just going, what an idiot. I mean, if I was him, I would never do that. It's a bit like that, you know what I mean? But I mean, he's an absolute... I'm not going to go into that because that's political talk and that's not needed. But yeah, the next thing I'm going to say, so my next point is physicality. So I got the physicality of it, and I could really work on it because he's quite an uptight, well-rounded, postured man who really does show himself with real authority and confidence, which is kind of like me as well. I kind of see myself in that confidence feel to me, and it was a good choice as well on that side. But yeah, that's how I learned as well, through his way of walking with the confidence he had, with real keenness to do his part. So nextly, what was my strength? So posture. My posture, as I said before, you know, because the Bastard was a confident, strong, loyal, and very, very much like he had a better ground idea of how to run the country if he was the king. No, he wasn't the king, but he wanted to try and make himself look like he was the best out of the lot. And to be honest, he was probably better. I mean, King Arthur or the Bastard himself, they would have been better than King John, because King John was just an absolute idiot. And he was just... he overthought how he should work, and he was just a really immature man. He did appalling things and made himself, he was overlooked, and he wanted to make himself the best, but he didn't know how to make himself best because he didn't know the feeling of less is more. And that's the same we all come up with. Less is more to be the best person you can be. And he wasn't that. He just overthought it. He thought of killing people who tried to get over him, who tried to take over his dictatorship. And he's more or less like a psychopath, even though he doesn't actually do it physically, but he does like force people to do it for him because he's also a bit of a coward as well. He's a real coward. But yeah, and then you can see how the bastard reacts to that, and with his real strength and real body posture, that he just goes, this is just ridiculous. Just stop being a sad, droopy, miserable man. Just be stronger and be a better example. Grow great, And that's one of the things he said in his monologue. Next thing, keep my coherency on how I could explain my way to the audience and saying my monologue. So the thing that I find with a lot of Shakespearean actors is they are so put off by the language that they say things that they're just saying through how they speak. And because, this is the good thing about SparkNotes, which is online, is that you can see the translation of Shakespearean language to our day language. And what we would say if we said the actual monologues we said, or the dialogues that are in the plays. But what I kind of learned was when watching George Costigan's version was that he used his use of he probably, from what I could see, is he probably learnt the translated version from maybe looking at it in a paper or looking at it in a script if it had it. He probably learnt that, and then of course, obviously had to learn the Shakespeare one, but he probably used that for extra help to help him reference how he could get the character out of him. And I think that's one thing that probably, it's a lot more hard work, but, it probably will be worth it when it comes to going on set or going on stage, and you sound better because you're really coming it across. And, it was coherent, it was clear, it explained exactly what his meaning was towards the king and how he wants to make himself the better man, how he wants to make himself look like he knew what he was doing a lot more. Next thing I would say would be that's it really. And so next one is weaknesses. So my weaknesses were, it seemed to have a little bit too much over the top. It was a bit too over the top for me physically. I'd probably say this is probably a mistake of mine, but because I'm much more of a musical actor, I do get into the traits of using a bit too much over the top acting in areas that I don't need, where that's not required. So Shakespeare, there was no such thing as over the top acting, and you've got to make sure you don't do it. You have to have a lot more of a natural, a lot more of a research type, but have this kind of really neutral feel to your character that kind of works for you, and use that as like your best trait to give it out. So the way I'm speaking now, I'm speaking naturally, I'm speaking neutrally. But when you're like a musical theatre actor, you can just go up and do all kinds of things, show your energy. But with Shakespeare, you've got to be a lot more neutral and a little bit more calm. Still project if you're on stage, but neutrally get your character out of you. And this probably is something I'll admit, but George Costigan is quite a bit of a stage actor, but he's quite a bit of a musical actor, because I knew that he was the original Mickey Johnston from Willie Russell's Blood Brothers, which is like the biggest musical that's going on UK tours, which is like a regular tour that's going on UK. It just doesn't stop, it's non-stop. But I could tell because he's had that experience. It's probably like a running meme to be over the top. And he probably did that, but the directors probably didn't tell him, less, please, George, less. And this is what I'm going to say for that is don't be someone who takes traits from other actors. Use your traits that make you the unique. And this is what I'm going to say with my next weakness. Don't make it too obvious that you are copying another actor. It's good to reference actors and it's good to reference them as like inspiration, but don't look like you're copying them. This is a thing that I do a lot. Especially if you're doing Shakespeare and you don't know the meaning of something, you start thinking, oh, I'll just watch someone else and just do exactly what they're doing. It's lazy. And this is something that I think I've learned a lot of, is if you just copy other actors, it makes you lazy. It makes you less experimental. And with entertainment, any form of entertainment is creativity. It doesn't matter whether you're doing something that you've created writtenly or it's something that has been done before, but you've been given the rights to act it. What audiences are looking for combinations. They are not looking for people who are plagiarizing other actors. It's a bit like, if I was just to copy an essay off of something and just put it in and not make reference to it. I mean, even though I do, but you don't make reference to it. The thing that is so annoying is you look at someone who's completely copying another actor and they haven't even made the effort to put a bit more time into it and really get the character. Because I'm much more of a visual actor. I learn a lot more through vision than I do through reading or through any other kind of form of reference. But I think this is something I want to put towards my future, is that I need to be a little bit more responsible and a bit more, and try and make a more effort into recognizing my character and seeing what makes my character unique from my standard. Because you get casted for what is the best suitability for you, but also what you've got to do is put in the time to know how to get your character across, because you want your character to be original. You don't want to be like, if you were to copy if you were to be a character that Rowan Atkinson has played, and you do exactly what he does, people will just go, you're being Rowan Atkinson. We don't want to see a Rowan Atkinson. We want to see a Hall. We want to see Alex Hall, his version of it, not Rowan Atkinson. It's the same thing. Try and find your spin to your character, and that's going to help a lot. So how I'm going to do that what am I going to do to improve my weaknesses? Pick a lot more of an over-the-top Shakespearean character to do for other monologues. I mean, I'm going to probably leave this one for future auditions, for my other auditions that will be coming up very soon this year. But if I was to do other auditions, maybe try to pick more characters from different plays which kind of suit me a little bit more, which are less historical and less complex. And I found that my research was a lot of complexity. And I find that I learn a lot more through a little bit less history that is so much more detail. And probably go for something that's a little bit more modern to a degree where you can learn a little bit from it. So I think that's the one thing that I'm going to try and do for if I was to do another Shakespearean monologue or even be in a Shakespearean play. Find a good suitable character that's going to suit me and find the right suitable Shakespeare play that's going to suit me the best and just learn from it. And also just keep original. Try to be original as I can, because don't be plagiaristic. Don't copy other actors. Don't copy other sinners. Do what you know is going to suit yourself. And that's going to make people say, oh, that's the version that Alexander Hall came up with. Instead of going, he's copying David Tennant. Oh, he's copying George Costigan. You don't want that. There were people going, he accused her, he copied him, that's not fair. You know, it could turn into a riot for all you know, because things have happened like that. I mean, it's silly, but, you know, that could happen. Right, that's me done. Thank you very much for watching. This is Alexander Hall with his Richard the Bastard monologue, which was assessed on the 30th of November. This is me over and out.